Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be going through Might Makes Right, a book by Ragnar Redbeard. Yes, that is a pen name for theoretically a guy named Arthur, but it looked like there wasn't confirmation of who Redbeard was. It was just everybody kind of assumed this was who Redbeard was, but it doesn't super matter. All that we need to know is that this was actually published in the late 1800s and the 1890s, because there was some question about whether that actually happened from the way that this is described. Because you could very easily play, was this written in the late 1800s or did a modern day YouTuber say this? It's not. It's kind of crazy. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoi, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt. You write a short story using that prompt in the first Monday video of the month. We read some of those together because you guys are brilliant. But I can't, just like I can't pet every cat, I can't read every prompt when there are a lot of them. And then the second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you just submit your first chapter and your cover, they will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more people find your work. And then the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available anywhere that you get books, including the library upon request or OneDrive if you go on there. And Bodymore 3 just came out at the end of October to finish the trilogy if you've been dying to see how it ends. There will be another book, but it will be a prequel. With that said, let's get into this. So why did I even read Might Makes Right? Well, it's been on my reading list for a while because the behaviors of the ideology I feel like I've seen in modern day behaviors and discussions, and even with the AI generated content, I feel like a lot of things at the moment are coming down to, well, if I'm more powerful than you, if I have more status, if I have more money, if I can just stomp on you, then what I do is correct. Like, the morality is all determined on who is the mightiest, and can you stop me? No? Then I guess I am correct in what I'm doing. That specifically feels like the morality of the generative AI garbage, but not the only place. And I feel like this particularly has been on the forefront of my mind since probably when I started working on the first Bodymore book, because that book is very much about the resentment and the desire to dominate others, and a lot of the hatred and anger towards neighbors and fellow man that I think have just been getting worse over the years. And so I wanted to read this book to better understand the ideology, because always we're better to look when you want to understand somebody than their own diatribes and their own words. It's why I read How to Be an Anti-Racist on this channel, and it's why I read a lot of actual books, because people will tell you exactly what they think and why they think if you give them the chance to, specifically if they're political people. So I wanted to pick this up to get to the bottom of some of this. This got boosted to the top because, one, I finished the ALA books, but then two, we've got the situation with Shad Brooks and his fans determining that they can't be stopped from stealing generative AI, that they can't be stopped from stealing art via generative AI, so then you should use it since you can't stop it, and Might Makes Right. And then you've got the insinuation from Nerdrotic that it's okay for fans of George R.R. Martin to steal his work and put it through ChatGPT to write their own Game of Thrones and release it with the same title. And Eric July and his fans stating that if the owner of the ISOM trademark wanted to maintain the ownership of that trademark, then they should be more popular than him. But because he technically, theoretically is more popular, then he should have a right to the trademark. So again, that is like a direct Might Makes Right. I'm more powerful than you, thus I get to take it. There is a certain subsect of people who believe that if you're stronger and can overpower a woman, then he deserves to rape her, and it's not really rape or immoral because he fairly beat her. That's part of the ideology. It's all a war game, and it's all a war. Everything about this is a war game of who has the most power, and the person who wins is the one who gets to determine what is morally right or wrong. The only correct is power. That's what Might Makes Right is. Do you have any other examples of Might Makes Right? Let me know in the comments down below. What a majority of this video is going to be will be readings from the book, because what better way to show the ideology than through the author's own words? And then if I'm trying to summarize what's in the book, it doesn't necessarily catch the same level of insanity that you read by actually taking in the person's words, so this is going to be very similar to the How to Be an Anti-Racist video I did, where I read a lot of passages from that book to show you what Ibram X. Kennedy believed. So in this case, we're going to talk about this, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the contents of this book. Have you heard the contents of this book in various places in modernity for justification? So with that said, make yourself cozy. Here's the synopsis, and we will go in and out of readings as I see fit. So the idea of might makes right is a pretty age old. The more powerful takes over and writes history and morality. This book was written and published in 1896. Well, I mean, it was written before that, but then published for real in 1896. Before getting into it, let me just say that the author sums up his beliefs in this quote. This book is a reasoned negotiation of the Ten Commandments, the Golden Rule, the Sermon on the Mount, Republican principles, Christian principles, and principles in general. It proclaims upon scientific evolutionary grounds the unlimited absolutism of might and asserts that cut and dried moral codes are crude and immoral inventions, promotive of vice and vassalage. Once we get through the opening, this book starts off with a page called Opportunity, which begins. A man's opportunities are never exhausted so long as other men who are not his friends possess millions of acres and thousands of tons of gold. The guarded treasure halls and ironclad temples of modern kings and presidents, high priests, and millionaires are positively the richest the world has ever known. This sets the stage for how other people's successes are yours to take. You only have to be more powerful than that person, and you can steal from them in order to get the rewards of their labor. Basically, a pirate's life. The next page reads, quote, "The natural world is a world of war. The natural man is a warrior. The natural law is tooth and claw. All else is error. A condition of combat exists everywhere. We are born into perpetual conflict. It is our inheritance, even as it is the heritage of previous generations. This condition of combat may be disguised with the holy phrase of Saint Francis or the soft, deceitful doctrines of Kropotkin and Tolstoy, but it cannot be eventually evaded by any human being or any tribe of human beings. It is there, and it stays there, and each man, whether he will or not, has to reckon with it. It rules all things, it governs all things, it reigns over all things, and it decides all who imagined policemanized populations, internally regulated tranquility, and state-organized industrialism so joyful, blessed, and divine." Following that, we have the statement of what you gain by following this doctrine. Virtue is rewarded in this world. Remember, natural law makes no false judgments. Its decisions are true and just, even when dreadful. The victor gets the gold and the land every time. He also gets the fairest maidens, the glory, tributes, and why should it be otherwise? Why should the delights of life go to failures and cowards? Why should the spoils of battle belong to the unwarlike? That would be insanity, utterly unnatural and immoral. The first chapter is called Introductory, opening with a speech on his tenets, quote, "Proclaiming death to the weakling, wealth to the strong. Open your eyes that you may hear, O men of mildewed minds, and listen to me, ye laborious millions, for I stand forth to challenge the wisdom of the world, to interrogate the laws of man and of God. I request a reason for the golden rule, and ask why and wherefore of your 10 commandments. I break away from all conventions, alone, untrammeled. I raise up in stern invasion the standard of strong. What is your civilization and progress if its only outcome is hysteria and downgoing? What is government and law if their ripened harvests are men without sap? What are religions and literatures if their grandest productions are hordes of faithful slaves? What is evolution and culture if their noxious blossoms are sterilized women? What is education and enlightenment if their Dead Sea fruit is the cative race with rottenness in its bones? Standard moral principles are arbitrarily assumed by their orthodox apologists to be a fixed and unalterable quantity, and that to doubt the divine rightness of these principles is treason and sacrilege. Although the average man feels in his heart that nearly all political and religious conventionalisms are dynamic deceits, yet how cautiously he avoids any open display of antagonism thereto. He has not the courage of his opinions. He is afraid to say openly what he thinks secretly. In other words, he is living in a state of subjectiveness, of vassalage. He allows his brain to be dominated and held in bondage by the brain of another. From his infancy, he has been deliberately subjected to a continuous external pressure, especially designed to coerce his understanding into strict accord with prearranged views of moral, political, or religious duty. He has been permitted one moment of real mental liberty. He imbibed fraudulent conventionalism with his mother's milk. He listened to the most hideous lies being glorified in his presence as sublime truths. He hears falsehoods sung in swelling chorus. He hears falsehoods sung in swelling chorus. He hears them sounded on bulges of silver and brass. He hears them intoned by congregations of faithful amid pearls of music. He hears them intoned by congregations of the faithful amid peals of sacred music and the solemn roll of chanted prayer. Thus, his mind is sterilized by authority before it has had a chance to mature. Thus, youth is mentally castrated, that its natural vitality may be afterwards used up by the yoke of customs, which is the yoke of slavery. In the nursery, at school, and at college, plastic brain pulp is deliberately forced into the prearranged mold. Everything that a corrupt civilization can do is done to compress the growing intellectuals into unnatural channels. Thus, the great mass of men who inhabit the world of today have no initiative, no originality or independence of thought, but are mere subjective individuals who have never had the slightest voice in the fashioning the ideals that they formally revere. Although the average man has taken no part in manufacturing moral codes and statute laws, yet how he obeys them with a dog-like submissiveness. He is trained to obedience, like oxen are broken to the yoke of their masters. He is born thrall habituated from childhood to the governed by others. Mankind is awary of its sham prophets, its demagogues, and its statesmen. It crieth out for the kings and heroes. It demands a nobility that cannot be hired with money like slaves or beasts of burden. The world awaits the coming of mighty men of valor, great destroyers of all that is vile, angels of death. We are sick into nausea of the good Lord Jesus, terror-stricken under the executive priests of the mob and proconsul. We are tired to death of equality. Gods are at a discount, devils are in demand. He who would rule the coming age must be hard, cruel, and deliberately intrepid, for the softness assails not successfully the idols of the multitude. Those idols must be smashed into fragments, burnt into ashes, that cannot be done by the gospel of love. It is a moral principle that manufactures beggars. It's the golden rules that glorify meekness. It is the statute laws that make spaniels of men. A man may keep every one of the 10 commandments and yet remain a fool all of his days of his life. He may obey every written law of the land and yet be catified and a slave. He may love Jesus, delight in the golden rule, and yet continue to the hour of his death a failure and dependent. Truly, the way of hell is by fulfilling the commandments of God. If the all-conquering race to which we belong is not to irrevocably dwindle into multitudinous nothingness like the inferior herds it has outdistanced or enslaved, then it is essential that the Semitic spiderwebs so astutely woven for ages into the brains of our chiefs be remorselessly torn out by the very roots, even though the tearing out process be both painful and bloody. The idea of hell is in some respects a truthful conception, suspective of actual facts. If we terrestrialize a location, there is nothing inharmonious about it. Many a race, many a tribe, and many a mighty empire has gone down into the grimly realistic Sheol. Is it not right and just that the vile, the base, and the degenerate, that is to say, the slave nations of the earth, should be punished pitilessly for their creeping cowardice? Is it not right that they should be, as if it were, fried and toasted, should swim in pools of boiling blood and dance sweltering satanic glees with blistered feet and straining eyeballs on red-hot Saharas of gravel and sand? So basically, we're getting to the point that an organized society is a sham, and morality is a set of rules that will not actually benefit you in life, and if you do follow morality rules, you deserve to be in hell because you were a pansy. You will suffer by being moral, and no other creature in existence operates via immorality. That's the argument that Redbeard makes. So why should humans? If animals don't operate with morality, why should humans? Why should you hold yourself back from doing whatever it is that you want to do in order to be top dog when nothing else in creation does that? Rules and morality only help the weak who aren't willing to do what nature does. He argues that rules and morality only help the weak who aren't willing to do what nature does in order to become the top. He also goes on to say that previous generations are in charge of what the foundation of the new generation is, and once something is turned into a popular lie, then there is no getting rid of it. Quote, popular lies have ever been the most potent enemies of personal liberty. There is only one way to deal with them: cut them out to the very core, just as cancers are. Exterminate them root and branch, or they will surely eat us all up. We must annihilate them, or they will us. Half and half remedies are of no avail. Half and half remedies are of no avail. However, when a lie has gone too far, when it has taken up its abode in the very tissue, bones, and brains of a people, then all remedies are useless. Even the lancets is of no avail. Repentance of the past misdeeds cannot save decadence from extermination. The fatal bolt is shot, and into the fiery furnace of wholesale slavery and oblivion they must go, to be there righteously consumed. From their ashes, something new, something nobler may possibly evolve, but even that is the merest optimistic superstition. So this stuck out to me because I've seen people in discussing politics, and especially in the country, talk about wanting to speed the destruction of the country up, calling it accelerationism, so that everything can be destroyed because, oh, it's too far gone, so we need to destroy it all so then something better can come up. And it's this exact same mindset of, oh, it's all lost, everything is lost, it's all a lie, we need to just destroy it so that I can then make my power on top of the ashes. The freeman is born free, lives free, and dies free. He is, even though living in an artificial civilization above all laws, all constitutions, all theories of right and wrong. He supports and defends them, of course, as long as it suits his own end. But if they don't, then he annihilates them by the easiest and most direct methods. Like the Spanish lieutenant, the master of the earth first flatter their dupes in order to more easily enchant them. So we see this a lot in political things, where you build your profile, you build your friendships by lying about who you are, what you believe, in order to grow, and then you can just, once you have all of the power, you can kind of just break whatever you want. Continuing on, he who saith unto himself, I must believe, I must not question, is not a man, but a mere pusillanimous mental gelding. He who believes because it has been handed down is a menial in his heart, and he who believes because it has been written is a fool in his folly. Sagacious spirits doubt all things, and hold fast only to that which the demonstratively are true. Masterful men laugh with contempt at spiritual thunders, and have no occasion to dread the decisions of any human tribunal. They are above and beyond all that. Laws and regulations are only for conquered vassals. The free man does not require them. He may manufacture and post up decalogue regulations, bind and control dependents with, but he does not himself bow down before those inventions of his own hands, except as a lure. So in this whole section, we have him talking about how morality and rules exist, and the only reason to follow them is to get to a better position of power, and that it is a legitimate strategy, and that the powerful should only follow the rules so long as it's expedient to gaining allies, followers, and positions. As soon as it holds you back, as soon as those rules hold you back from getting more power, then it's time to start ignoring them. In the same way that you might see people saying that they respect property or hard work, or that you got to pull yourself up, until they are happy to gloat about how you can't stop them from stealing your art, and they are fine taking everything from you because you can't stop them. Quote, a man is under no obligation to obey anything or anybody. It is only serving men that must obey, because they are caitiffs by birth, breeding, and conditions. Morals are only required in an immoral community. Meekness of the spirit is regarded by him as a covenant superstition, very useful for regulating the lives of his servants, his women, and his children, but otherwise inoperative. I rest my hopes on nothing, proclaimed Goethe. and masterful minds in all ages have never done otherwise. This unspoken thought gives to all truly great men their manifest superiority over the brainless. The common people have always had to be befooled with some written or wooden or golden idol, some constitution, declaration, or gospel. Consequently, the majority of them have ever been mental thralls, living and dying in an atmosphere of strong illusions. They are befooled and hypnotized even to this hour, and a large proportion of them must remain so until time is no more. Indeed, the masses of mankind are but a sediment from which all the more valuable elements have been long ago distilled. They are totally incapable of real freedom, and if it was granted to them, they would straightway vote themselves a master or 1,000 masters within 24 hours. Mastership is right. Mastership is natural. Mastership is eternal, but only for those who cannot overthrow it and trample it beneath their hoofs. Is it not a fact that in actual life the ballot box votes of 10 million subjects' personalities are the thistle down in the balance when weighed against the far-seeing thought and material prowess of, say, 10 strong, silent men? It is notorious, usually so, that the blackest falsehoods are ever decked out in the most brilliant and gorgeous regalia. Clearly, therefore, it is the bravest man's duty to regard all sacred things, all legal things, all constitutional things, all holy things with more than the usual suspicion. I deny and I affirm is a countersign of material freedom. I believe and I obey is a shibboleth of serfage. Belief is a flunky, a feminine. Doubt is a creator, a master. He who denies fundamentals is the triple armor clad. Indeed, he is invaluable. On the other hand, it has been said that every belief, every philosophy has some truth in it, but so we might add, has every insanity. Strong men are not deterred from pursuing their aim by anything. They go straight to the goal, and that goal is beauty, wealth, and material power. The mission of power is to control and exploit the powerless, for to be powerless is to be criminal. The world would indeed be a house of horrors if all men were good and all women padlocked. So think of this. The people that embrace this sort of mindset consider the mission of power to be controlling the powerless, to be manipulating and exploiting the powerless. Everybody underneath them is meant to be exploited, which is why we see some of the mindset that we do with especially the AI creators. You'll see actually some of that on Saturday with some of the topics that I'm going to cover. But this mindset believes that if you are in a position of powerlessness or a position underneath them, then it is criminal because you're not your own master. That is an important line. And it also explains, if the assumption is that if you are underneath them, then you are to obey because you are a servant, then it also explains the level of offense that is taken when a Hollywood elite or some sort of elite says this is how you will behave, and some layman or some normal person says, no. Because that is a direct rejection of their power, of their servitude, and you're supposed to just listen. Quote, everyone who would be free must show his power. Unalterable remains of basis of all earthly greatness. He who exalteth himself shall be exalted, and he who humbleth himself shall be righteously trodden beneath the hoof of a herd. The humble are only fit for dog's meat. Bravery includes every virtue, humility, every crime. He who is afraid to risk his life must never be permitted to win anything. Human rights and wrongs are not determined by justice, but by might. Disguise it as you may, the naked sword is still the kingmaker and the king-breaker as of yore. All other theories are lies and allures. Therefore, if you would conquer wealth and honor, power and fame, you must be practical, grim, cool, and merciless. You must ride the success by preference over the necks of your foemen. Their defeat is your strength. Their downfall is your uplifting. Only the powerful can be free, and power is non-moral. Life is real. Life is earnest, and neither heaven nor hell is final goals. And love and joy and birth and death and fate and strife shall be forever. Though the survival of the strongest is the logic of events, yet personal cowardice is the greatest device of our demoralized age. Cowardice is corroding the brain and blood of our race. But men have learnt to disguise their terrible infirmity behind the canting within of humanity and goodness. Words flow instead of blood. Terrible insults are exchanged instead of terrible blows. Courage that never falters, never retreats. Courage that looks down with supreme disdain upon all slaves' regulations, upon all rights and wrongs, upon all goods and evils. Courage that has made up its mind to conquer and perish. That is the kind of courage this world lacks. That is the kind of courage that aids by active cooperation the survival of the fittest, the survival of the best. The way that strong ideologues of sorts get you is by having some truths and some not truths. Because if they get you with what some of those truths are, then people have a harder time like saying no, but the rest of that is wrong. And I don't know why that is. There's a psychological reason behind that, but it's like people have a hard time differentiating that you can be right about one thing and then wrong about another thing. And we see this also in discourse, just even in modern day discourse, where somebody that you maybe don't like says something and you're like, yeah, that is totally incorrect. But then they say something else that you actually agree with. But a lot of people still have that instinctive desire to say, no, that's wrong, because they feel like they're aligning with that person if they say it's correct. But you can say you were right about this thing and wrong about this thing without it being an entire identity. But so you'll see that in here. Like, well, it's good to not back down when you are correct. It's not helpful to anything to not back down if you're wrong. You're only looking for dominance and subjugation with the mindset of I'm never going to back down ever, because only the weak men back down. And the truth is, if you stomp on them, then you are correct. The second chapter is called Iconolastic. Quote, as far as sociology is concerned, we must either abandon our reason or abandon Christ. He is preeminently the prophet of unreason, the preacher of rabble-rabies. All that is enervating and destructive of manhood he glorifies. All that is self-reliant and heroic he denounces. All that is atrocious he upholds. All that is noble he perverts. All that is atrocious he upholds. He inverts all the natural instincts of mankind and urges us to live artificial lives. He commands the demonization of virtues that aggrandize a people and advise his admirers to submit in quietness to every insult, consternly, indignity, to be slaves de facto. Indeed, in letter and in spirit, Christianity is above all things a political theory, and a theory that often takes the form of raging hysterics. Is the golden rule a rational rule? Is it not rather a menial rule, a coward rule, a best policy rule? Why is it right for one man to do unto others as he would have others do unto him? What is right? If others are unable to injure him or do good to him, why should he consider them at all? Love your enemies and do good to them that hate you and despitefully use you is a despicable philosophy of the spaniel that rolls onto his back when kicked. Obey it, O reader, and you and all of the posterity to the 10th generation shall be irretrievably and literally damned. They shall be hewers of the wood and carriers of water, degenerates, Gibeonites. But hate your enemies with your whole heart, and if a man smite you on one cheek, smash him down, smite him hip and thigh, for self-preservation is the highest law. He who turns the other cheek is a cowardly dog, a Christian dog. Give blow for blow, scorn for scorn, doom for doom, with compound interest liberally added thereunto. Eye for eye and tooth for tooth, eye fourfold, 100-fold. Make yourself a terror to the advisory. A lot of this chapter 2 section is going to be about how the government is a scam and they rule over you and steal your stuff. Then there's a section about racial superiority and how you're in your right to mistreat others if you are stronger, if you are more superiorly genetically created, and that's a given with how this author has titled his book. Because of the differences in people, it says that there is no such thing as equality among humans, and that's proven by merit changing who succeeds and who doesn't. He says some people are just born to lead and other peoples are born to be followers or to be slaves, and if you are the type that was born to be genetically inferior, then you deserve to be conquered. Yeah, there is stuff about being born to be slaves because of the disposition and breeding of your people, and that since people are different, clearly somebody's got to rule you. He also talks about how the government controls the schools, which brings up the next generation. They hire teachers, and so they hire the teachers, and so then those teachers indoctrinate the students into being subservient to the government in the next generation, and the cycle just continues. He says that this is why he believes so many men in the next generation are neutered. It's a control mechanism put in place to enslave the men who would otherwise be free and challenging the government. Quote, Come right in here, and will improve your minds free of cost, suavely saith the high priest of the new idolatry, this devouring dragon, the impersonal state. So the pure-hearted, rosy-cheeked little ones enter unsuspectingly. Gradually, as they are brought under the influence, the gray-brained pulp is forced out of the plastic young skulls, and lies, nice, pretty poetic lies, mixed with unavoidable facts and perverted truths, skillfully injected. Did you ever see a medical student extract the brain of a frog and then fill a vacuum with Flythe? The frog does not die. It lives, hops about quite lively, and seems to possess a former intelligence and vitality, but it is an illusion. What experimental vivisectionists do to frogs, state priests do to children of men. Bit by bit, with dates and lists and immaculated histories, the iniquitous brain-wrecking deviltry proceeds. When complete, young men and women are turned out with idle brains into a warring world, incapable, semi-imbeciles, unable to defend or assert themselves, footballs of fate ready to be served to anyone. Is it not notorious, the ineptitude, mechanical imitativeness, and want of initiative displayed by the state-educated men? Instead of being urged to think or act for themselves, they are taught, like well-drilled slaves, to obey and believe. They are even trained to worship idols, with stride shouts and modulated canticles. Not honest idols of wood and stone, but idols of sheepskin, bound pamphlets, variegated rags, and falsified renown of dead scoundrels, i.e. statesmen. Then he also states how there must be slaves and lower people to differentiate the betters from the not betters. Quote, the necessities of environmental make of each man the enemies or rival of other men, more especially those with whom he comes in direct personal conflict. Where then does equality come in? It does not come in at all. It is an idiotic myth. There must always be a substratum of victimized organisms. How could the tiger live if there were no victims to devour? How could there be heroes if there were no slaves? How could there be great nations if there were no contemptible ones? This kind of makes me think of the dialogue that happens in books or in politics, where there always is a victim. There always is a victim class in order to say, hey, you're being victimized, so stand up against this thing. We need to defeat this thing. There is no hope because there will always be a victim class, and you are part of the always victim class. Like, it is a manipulation tactic that is used in a bunch of different ways. Quote, compare the noble qualities inherent in some dogs with the obsequious virtues that distinguish 9 men out of 10. Now, give the canine or homo equal liberty of action, equal opportunity, equal rights, and what will be the result? Must not be the fiercest fighter fatten, while the skeleton of lean weaklings projects through their scrofulous hides. What power originating among themselves could dictate and enforce equality and opportunity? Socialism, Christianism, democratism, equalityism are all whining yelpings of base-bred mongrel multitudes. They howl aloud for state intervention, protection from suffering humanity, regulated mill grinding, as it were, with the state of their supreme idol, their god and master, their all in all, their great panjandrum. Apparently I forgot to mark when I read chapter 3, but I'm pretty sure it was the stuff about the state, because chapter 2 was specifically about icons and iconography, specifically with Jesus Christ. Because in case it's not obvious, Redbeard hates Christianity. I mean, he hates everything, let's be real. But he thinks that Christianity and religion in general are just idols of weak men. And he hates kindness, and he hates what he considers weakness. Chapter 4 is called Man the Carnivore, where he is going to talk about how man is an animal and savage in his nature. The ideas of people like Christ are unreachable. And he also is like, who is Jesus Christ anyway? He wasn't a god. He wasn't an aspiration. What godlike things did he even do? None. So he is clearly just a trick to enslave humans and convince them against their human nature of savagery. He also admires the gods of the Greeks and the Vikings for being powerful, shrewd, sexually vigorous, and victorious, and the like. Quote, among virile conquering tribes, the ideal man is ever the all-daring Jove, the splendid Apollo, the self-reliant Achilles, or the constructive genius. It is only in centuries of dotage, in ages of cankersome downing, of nervous disease, that the model man becomes a Christ. That model man of our forefathers was Odin, a warlord, but our ideal man is a weeping, horse-whipped Jew. A Jew for a god. The deities of the Greeks and Vikings, Goths and Romans were all originally mighty men of valor, or virile women of surpassing beauty, afterwards held up before their warlike posterities as splendid examples of natural nobility, conscious power, daring courage, shrewdness, sexual vigor, and boundless strength of character. The gods and heroes of antiquity spent their vital force in the destruction of monsters, in the seizures of new hunting grounds, in the slaughtering of tyrants, and in the breeding of unconquerable sons. But Christ, the God of Christendom, the divine exemplar, that majestic figure, what godlike deed did he ever do? What unconquerable sons did he beget? It sounds like he devolves into saying cannibalism is also very normal and human because the animal kingdom is full of cannibalism, and also the strong animals eat the weak animals, and humans are no different than animals. Also, there's just this list after list after list of human societies eating humans, using human bodies for different rituals and to build things, and it is a long list. He goes through as much as he can think of or that he was educated in to say humans, cannibals, peak society, peak human nature. Quote, "It may grate upon unstrung nerves to be harshly told these gruesome facts in straight language. However, calm, sensible readers must unreservedly admit that man is not a pretty, harmless little cherub, not even a lamb, but the fiercest of all vertebrates. He is the fighting, roving, pillaging, lusting, cannibalistic animal par excellence, the king of the great carnivores. When he takes his walk abroad, the wild beasts of the field and the birds of the air, even the most courageous of them, are stricken dumb. Shuddering, they fly from his shadow or his odor down the wind, hiding and trembling and quaking with terror." He also says that it's okay to lie to get power, which shouldn't be a surprise since he said that already. But he says, quote, "To base a lie upon a myth is certainly much safer than to base it on reality, for you cannot run a tape measure over myth. Hate for hate and ruth for ruth, eye for eye and tooth for tooth, scorn for scorn and smile for smile, love for love and guile for guile, war for war and woe for woe, blood for blood and blow for blow. Thou hast listened full oft to the diabolic philosophy of the divine creepling. Love your enemies and bless them that they hate you and despitefully use you. But I say unto you, love thy kindred, love thy friends, love thyself, and hate thine enemies with thy whole heart. Be a foe to your friend's foe, a friend to your friend's friend, and above all things permit no wrong done unto thee or thine to pass unchallenged, unaddressed, unavenged. Let thy motto be, tread not on me. For he that tamely submits to insult and injury is worse than a dog. He is a dastard, a born slave, a Christling. I'm the friend of all brave men, the foe of all cowards. I call up high daring. I cast down despair." Pretty much Redbeard just wants to be the gun in control. It's not that he believes in like no control, it's just like he thinks he is the top dog of everything and he will take and be in the control. He will be the king. You can't beat him, and if you can't beat him, then he deserves to be beat. Chapter 5 is called The Chief End of Manhood. Quote, "You must tread on the necks of your enemies if you would win renown. It is success that makes a great man," was Napoleon's dictate. "The whole duty of a man in this world is to succeed, to help him defeat his foes, outstrip his rivals. He who conquers not is conquered. He who is unable to trample roughshod over others will assuredly be trampled by them. In the strength of his arm, man eats his bread. In the sweat of his brow and brain, the slave earns his bread for a master." So you can see how just this kind of mindset would be very destructive to somebody if they really embrace it. And I feel like I've seen this so much in a lot of just not even war discourse. It's just like regular discourse because people think that if you're wrong, then suddenly you're conquered. And so it's like you can't even have regular conversations with people anymore because everybody sees a challenge or a disagreement as something more personal and more damaging than what it actually is. It's become a war game. Though this chapter is a little bit funny because it calls out how women still loved the bad boy trope in the 1800s. Quote, "Power and prosperity over the multitude of sins, of alleged sins, but men and women, especially women, have an overflowing fund of sympathy and forgiveness for the bold bad man if he is victorious. How women admire men of leonine resolution and eagle principles. How they detest cowardice, goodness, feebleness, effeminacy failure. There is no character in history so universally applauded as the bold bad rebel and the mighty conqueror. Also, he offers us some real estate advice. Quote, scorn all insolent dictations as to right or wrong. Decide right and wrong for yourself. Get property honestly if you can. But remember, business is business. Get it on, honestly, but business is business. Bro, I'm gonna need you to tell me what that means. And then he's got his relationship advice in this quote. Readers must distinctly understand that sexual morality is no wise condemned in these pages. In all sexual relations, as in everything else, morality is what strength decrees. Women are frail beings at the best of times, and in their secret hearts are probably lovers of the unlimited. For the welfare of the breed and the security of the descent, they must be held to thorough subjugation. Man has captured them, and besides providing for and protecting them, it is a necessity to keep them on a chain, as it were. Woe unto him, woe unto them, and woe unto our race if ever these lovable creatures should break loose from mastership and become the rulers or equals of man. But that is impossible. From the earliest age, man has captured his wife by force or stratagem, and to this day, he does the same. Marriage ceremonies symbolize his proprietorship, his capture. The marriage ring is one link of the chain, emblematic of the fact that the prehistoric bridegroom chain is beloved one in a cave, till she became tame, untractable, and reciprocative. In his sexual relations, the insolence interference of the church and state is gradually reducing man to a mere cipher and establishing a system of organized concubinage, or rather, promiscuity. The records of our divorce courts show that sexual infidelity is spreading like wildfire. A prominent New Yorker has publicly asserted that 2/3 of a married woman in that city are systematically unfaithful, and a fat, sordid pressling named Moody openly advises his female lambs to enter the joys of godly freedom via that harlot factory, the divorce court. Here he is going to go on about how society has fallen and doesn't respect men as the leader of the household anymore. You might start seeing like a lot of similarities between what he's saying and what some political opiners today say. Apparently things have not really changed that much in 150 years. Or Redbeard would have his own Manosphere podcast if he was alive in the year 2023. Quote, look over at France, where the growth of government supervision and absolutism of the husband is attenuated to a mere fiction. And what do you see? A nation steeped in communistic eroticism. As the Stygian sewer, French women are notoriously unfaithful, and the most horrible sexual lusts are practiced and pleasantly laughed at. Their promiscuity results in barrenness, and this, when supplemented by correlated self-sterilization, is rapidly transmuting the once all-powerful Frankish confederacy into feeble and decaying tribe of wasted marasma-struck manglings, sheltering themselves beneath the all-protecting wing of the Asiatic despot. The title of a man to the proprietorship of his wife does not originate with church or state or majority vote. It is inherent in the man himself. We also learn that, quote, in all practical operations, non-principled persons possess a distinctive advantage over principled ones. Honesty never succeeds, for when it succeeds, it is not honesty. There is no fair play in love and war, and all life is made up of love and war. Genuinely honest men die as a rule like dogs in a ditch, and in business affairs, they are nowhere. In their dotage or in God's good time, they nearly always go over the hill to state infirmaries, unknown and friendless. It's like, you follow the law, freaking loser. Quote, certainly it is not a good strategy for a man to openly proclaim the loss of his faith in conventional moralism if he desires to get on in the world. A wiseling keeps his real sentiments on his point to himself, guards them on his own life. The best mask for moral heresy is one of pretended sanctity. It is very effective. Nearly all the higher thieves are ostentatiously pious. Thus, when you hear pulpitists and journalists vociferously proclaiming their profound acquiescence in moral principles, it is safe to conclude that they are engineering some subterranean swindle. Belief is a war stratagem, an instrument of deceit, a convenient falsification formula, a beautiful hoodwink. Hence, it is that very religious and very holy persons are almost always thoroughly going scoundrels at heart, utterly unreliable, utterly untrustworthy. Generally, their whole lives are one long drawn-out mendacity, the genuineness of thought or action in their minds attenuated to a mere sham. So what you got here is Redbeard calling out virtue signaling in 1896, okay? He's like, look, if people are proclaiming that they have these beliefs, and they're doing it very loudly, you can freaking bet that they are liars. Obviously, after all of this, ranting from Redbeard, winners don't have morals, and no one really has morals because everyone is just faking it that they have morals, in particular so that they can be kind of successful, because if you show that you don't have morals, then the other people that pretend to have morals are going to know you don't have morals and then go after you, and then you're not going to be able to whatever. It's all fake. It's all just fake. Finally, he also says that he believes that top-tier men can never have morals. Quote, "The man animal can never be rendered absolutely moral because by nature he is full of wiles as a fox or a Jew. He should be insanely endeavored to abandon his predatory propensities, then he immediately begins to degenerate. Should he insanely endeavor to abandon his predatory propensities, then he immediately begins to degenerate and ultimately becomes a feeble, diseased, ghost-ridden monstrosity, a horror to look at. Therefore, those who conscientiously try to become honest or good are permitting themselves to be sacrificed as burnt offerings on idol altars." So, what are your thoughts on that? Can there be a successful good man, or do you have to be a terrible person or a criminal in order to be successful in society? Let's just say in society. He also says that honesty would only be a good policy if all men were honest, but if one man is dishonest, then screw honesty, because that one dishonest guy will screw over everybody else who is honest. So it's better to just be dishonest to cover for that one guy, because obviously not everybody is going to be honest anyway. Quote, "Why then do parents inoculate the plastic minds of their children with false conceptions of moral conduct when they themselves know from personal experience that all such conceptions are a positive handicap in the race for wealth and power? What a witless procedure to teach ideals at home, at school, or at college, and that we know in our hearts are thoroughly going lies, and then expect nobility of personal conduct to be the resultant. Turn out into the world a young man well trained in moral principles, and the chances are 99% to 1 against him." He then says that men usually become successful after age 30 because they've gotten rid of the false idealisms that they were raised on and can now act like the true predators that they are. He then says he who denies man's right to exploit men impeaches not only the conduct of man, but also the order of nature. So theft, abuse, and exploitation are all just human nature, and if you have morals, then you're actually the bad one rejecting human nature. This is further explained as good and evil are human inventions that don't actually exist and hold people back from reaching their full potential. Quote, "Good and evil liveth only in men's minds. They are not realities but shadows, credos, ghosts, and only the maddest of men worship their own shadows. What is right? What is wrong? These elemental interrogatories have been asked in every age, for every age formulates replies to suit itself. De facto right and wrong are no more than arbitrary algebraic signs representing hypnagogic fantasies. They are mere symbols emblematic of belated fragments of insolent ecclesiastical crudities. In nature, all developments are essentially one and the same phenomenon, indefinitely transfused and intermingled. Good and evil are human inventions born of human foolery, narrowness, and short-sightedness. The human brain is far too small and too contemptible to completely comprehend what nature is driving at. What appears to be wrong to us may be right in nature and vice versa." He further explains subjectivity with, quote, "Even what is right to one man under one set of circumstances may be utterly wrong to the same man under a different set of circumstances. Cromwell, as colonel of the Ironsides, thought regal absolutism the essence of the diabolical, but as president of the Republic, he demanded it in himself as a crowning mercy. When government soldiers shoot down American rebels, that is called a glorious victory. But when government soldiers shot Colonel rebels during the Red Flag riot, inaugural of the War of Independence, that is conventionally labeled wicked massacre. When a band of rich men plunder the poor, that is business shrewdness, practical statesmanship, or financial integrity. But if bands of poor men plunder the rich, that is larceny, burglary, highway robbery, and rebellion. So right and wrong, good and evil, all depend on the victor, the perspective, basically. And technically, with how humans, history operates, that is true. We do have the phrase, history is written by the victor. And so depending on who wins any battle, you're going to have that victor paint themselves as the hero. But also in any war, the person that's fighting for your side technically is always going to be seen as the good guy, while the person fighting against your side is always going to be seen as the bad guy, generally speaking. Redbeard also uses war as an example. Different cultures' views on polygamy versus monogamy also shows good versus evil, or moral versus immoral. He says every age and nation has its own version of right and wrong, and every man must choose which values to uphold, and people who disobey the rules become their own man and a hero to his own life. He finishes by saying that politicians and thieves are the same word, especially in America, France, and Australia. The government is the greatest blackmailer. Quote, the government is the greatest blackmailer. Also, Redbeard comes out as a PETA advocate. Quote, far better for a free animal to be killed outright than to be mastered, subordinated, and enchained. Also, mentally, morally, and physically, a full-grown man should swear allegiance to no extraneous moralism, custom, or arbitrary rule of conduct. He ought to take a special pride in developing his own individuality, independent of other men whatsoever. In the maxim, union is strength, there lies an abiding fallacy. Very often in practical affairs, he is the greatest who stands most apart. Every man for himself is the law of life. Every man for the institution, a god or a dogma, is the law of death. Mind your own business is a line of thought very much neglected in the infirm age, when every sodden degenerate fancies that it is his business to be every other degenerate's keeper, guardian, or nurse. Cain's wrathful retort, "Am I my brother's keeper?" contains a far-reaching practical philosophy that is deserving of calm consideration in light of contemporary socialistic maladjustments and biological evolutionism. So what we've learned so far is rights don't exist. They are just the spoils of force used by other So what we learn at the end of this section is that rights don't exist. They're just the spoils of the force used by previous people, and they have to be maintained because those people won your rights to do your thing. And that was done by putting force on other people. Also, if you have the strength to become an authority, then you should do it. And also, you may be subordinated by others if you don't do it. There is this worship of leaders of the past who understand brutality better than the modern man. Then he asserts that the job of the poor is to be oppressed by the rich, and the job of the rich is to oppress the poor. So again, we see some of that in general discourse overall. Quote, the men who talk of permanently reconciling conflicting worldwide energies are wasting their breath for naught. Compromise is out of the question, and now, as of old, except as a temporary expedient. The rich and the poor are both inevitably natural products and complements of each other. Like the opposing currents of electrical battery, it is the business of the rich to exploit the poor, and it is equally the business of the poor to defeat and exploit in their turn. The oppression of one class by another is always induced by the physical cowardice of the victimized, and nature has no love for dastards, whether rich or poor. Oppression is one of the necessary phases of evolution. In order, therefore, to ensure the subordination and ultimate annihilation of lower types, the struggle for survival is imposed upon humans as upon all other animals. Even when our eminent wiselings are predicting eras of universal peace and containment, the contending cohorts are preparing to jump at each other's throats as of yore. Might must decide all things in the future as it has decided all things in the past, and they who teach otherwise are either dishonest or have no real conception of the magnitude of the consequence of biological determinants. He can do as he likes with his own as long as he has the power. He may own the earth by its agency if he wants to, and he may buy or sell men or nations if he feels so inclined or thinks it profitable. There is in nature no limit to his energies or ambitions. All that he has needed is power equal to the design. But the same principles may be acted upon by any other man or association of men, and the conflict ensues. Fitness is proved, absolutely and without a doubt. The rights of the rich are what they can maintain, and the rights of the poor are no less. No bounds are set to the accumulation of property, and none whatsoever to its redistribution. Fair play is not even an essential or a requisite. It may be established, if mutually desired by both combatants, but it may also be wholly dispensed with. In real life, it is always dispensed with by those who possess a preponderance of material might. Equality can only exist amongst equals. Civilization implies division of labor, and division of labor implies subordination, and subordination implies injustice and inequality. Woe to me if I speak not the truth. Society is also a matter of convenience, but it also gets in the way of things. Quote, society is altogether a matter of convenience, an implement, an expediency. It is the creation of man, and what man manufactures may be modified or destroyed. To the strong, all laws are cobwebs, and when society becomes irksome to the strong, they may dissolve it. Nay, it is the positive duty to dissolve it, otherwise it becomes their master and consequently their enemy and oppressor. Society in danger, therefore, is merely the hysteria of the megalomaniac. Society, in some shape, must exist, as long as there are two human beings left alive, for companionship is a natural to the homo as swarming is to the bee. When, however, the word society develops into a synonym for socialistic restraint, then it becomes a menace. And the thesis of this chapter then ends that Jesus Christ was created to demonize man's nature, and thus Christendom is a bondage to stop man from being what man is supposed to be. The final chapter of Redbeard's manifesto is called Love, Women, and War. Can you guess what we're about to get into? So everything about this chapter is sex and war, and warring in order to have sex, because obviously if you conquer something, then you get to claim the women, and women like soldiers and power, and soldiers obviously get to choose what they want to do. Quote, peace on earth and mercy mild is mere lunacy babblement. Even sheep, the most Christly of animal, wages tremendous duels in due season. There is no other earthly passion so fiercely, savagely egotistic as sexual desire, and it is the physical basis of all human love. Even the most ethereal and romantic everywhere, the season of love is the season of battle, and when the fires of sexualism burn low in a nation or men, they are unfit for freedom as they are unfit to reproduce their kind. Now, Redbeard asserts that women love soldiers, athletes, kings and nobles, and fighting men above everyone else. Nothing is less attractive to women than losing a fight. And also, women hate cowards. Quote, young women have an instinctive detestation for the good young men that died kind of adore, and they positively abhor a pale coward, even though he be a blood relation. Strength, energy of character, ferocity, and courage she admires in her possible husband above all other qualities combined. Even to be carried off by force is repugnant to her feelings, if the bold bad man is in other respects acceptable. Conquer some personalities by attaining possessions of the best and handsomest females, raise up the rule, conquer some descendants. Hence the origins of the great race. Second-class males are driven by necessity to mate with second-class females, and in strict sequence third-class males select partners from feminine remainders. Hence the stereotyped nature of servile castes. Sounds like the high-quality male, high-quality female talk, if you ask me. Superior males take racially superior women, and inferior males are permitted to duplicate themselves per media of inferior feminines. It also says that women love brute. Tier 2 men are doomed to be dominated by Tier 1 men, and Tier 3 men are dominated by Tier 2 men. Women love murderers and poems and stories about battles. It further uses the fact that women from conquered areas usually get with the soldiers, so clearly women prefer soldiers, not like it was, this is your life now because you're from a conquered people. Quote, as the stars and the suns and primordial atoms attract each other by odic force, so do handsome women and brave men. The nerve cells of splendid feminines and resolute warriors vibrate in rhythmic unison. Between them is a mutual freemasonry that neither creed nor culture has ever been able to eradicate, because it is part of the cosmic plan for evolving a higher and yet higher type. Womankind mobilized in battalions of beauty as football matches, ball tournaments, aquatic carnivals, and sham battles, just as feminines of Auld Lanson gather at the archery spots, the Colosseum combats, the Olympian Games, and the Neolithic war dances. In their worship of the warrior, Indian squaws, lionesses, and ballroom belles are in harmonious accord. University professors, priests disguised, and supersanct demagogues may rail in florid prose and honeyed lines lines of rhythm against militarism and the horrors of war, but they might much more logically rear up on their hind legs and bray furiously at the belt of Orion, or kick out the silly desperation at the glancing spears of the northern lights. When these poor miserable manlings, geniuses they name each other, do happen by some luck of chance to get a woman, they make her like a torment, to scarcely ever leave any progeny behind them, for the doom of degeneracy is upon every nerve and filament of their bodies. Who ever heard of a forlorn virgin risking her life or reputation to mate herself with a sanctimonious creeping thing or bespectacled servant? As agent provocateurs, women have never been surpassed by men. Cornelia turned up with two brilliant sons with a view to hurl them against and overturn the Roman oligarchs, a city of harlots led by sans-culottes of the French Revolution. So, it's saying women are the biggest betrayers because they can control people, but also, does this not sound a modern YouTuber or a wannabe warlord from the 1800s? In many respects, women have proved themselves more cruel, bloodthirsty, and revengeful than men. Women are also remarkably good liars. Deception is an essential and necessary part in their mental equipment. They are inherently deceitful. Men, however, reckon upon that and discount it well in advance. Without deception of some sort, a woman would have no defense whatsoever against rivals, lovers, and husbands. We must not forget that women really hate each other immensely. It is natural for women to prevaricate. It is natural for women to prevaricate as it is for men to resent a blow to the face. It is their weapon. Hence they take up with false religions, priestcrafts, superstitions much more readily than men. They like to play hypocrite and pretend to be oh so holy when secretly their thoughts are carnal, self-centered, and materialistic. When women think, they think falsely. When they follow their instinct, they do exactly what their nature intended for them to do, limited, of course, by the inevitable man, the brute that he is. Women are beautiful animals, deceitful companions, affectionate mothers, sisters, and wives, kind-hearted friends, but they are born dissimulators. A woman is primarily a reproductive cell organism, a womb structurally embastioned by a provocative defense osseous network and surrounded by the atena, a blood vessel necessary for supplying nutrients to the growing ovum or embryo. Sexualism and maternity dominate the lives of all true women. To such an extent this is so that they have such little time left or the inclination to think, and therefore they've never fitted out ab initio with reasoning organs. Probably this is what Mahomet alluded to when he tenaciously affirmed that women have no soul. Even in men, the soul is probably a fiction, but in women, its absence is the absolute certainty. Women are made sexually attractive to equilibrate their lesser masculinity. Also, it said earlier in this book that women are 2/3 a womb. I'm sorry, women got no soul in your 2/3 a womb, according to Redbeard. Quote, they will not object except in a giggling, semi-sentimental sort of way because they comprehend their own incapacity for self-mastership and logical business methods. They are never touched with any sense of personal responsibility, are mere babies in worldly concerns, hysterical, well supplied with tear glands, verbal mechanisms, but lovable anyways. Slaves and women are notoriously incompetent of self-control, of holding their own in business, when not inspired and assisted by male friends. They are intended by nature to be loved and defended, but not to be equalized. Among the Norse and the Germanic forefathers, it was considered the saddest disgrace that could befall any matron to be the mother of a weakling or a laird in war. Only for the debasing influence of the priestcraft that would be felt by modern women of all grades. Roman matrons have died of broken hearts and even drowned themselves in shame at the patroonery displayed by a son. If past generations had to depend on sweet girly girl fragile young things of today, or of the lean lady graduate for its reproductive ova, we would long ago have become a swarm of ring-tailed baboons. Poor things, they also feel their artificiality, feel it in their hearts. Then they look upon the spindle-shanked, mutilated males, scarecrows of men, that they are expected to love, honor, and obey. Over-intellectualism, bad enough in men, transfigures women into freaks. The more animal nature a maiden possesses, the more of a true woman she is, the better wife and mother she will make. Culture and refinement are horrible substitutes for the grand old matronly virtues: beauty, naturalness, purity, maidenly hypnotism. Intellectualism renders more sensitive. Over-cultivating of the brain cells undoubtedly produced in both sexes physical decay and leads toward insanity. Women's noblest occupation is not merely to read erotic novels, pound the fiddle, waltz divinely, or fry steak and onions, but to breed men, to raise up a race of unsubduable fighters for their own hand. Her vilest occupation is to duplicate anemic platoons, creeping Judases, laborious jackasses. Therefore, if she desires her sons to be brave, bold, and successful in the battle of life, she should see to it that her husband is not a coward or a slave. And men ought also beware of marrying slave-minded women. As an African explorer, he once came across a native tribe, the Jolofs, remarkable for their comparatively fine appearance. He asked one of them, "How is it that everyone whom I meet is so good-looking, not only your men, but your women?" "That is easily explained," was the reply. "It has always been our custom to pick out our worst-looking ones and sell them as slaves." Except in sexual matters, a woman has no more brains than a cock sparrow. But in question of marriage and love, she is an expert. Other things being equal, women prefer a rich man to a poor man for a husband, and they are scientifically justified. He who is without wealth amidst unlimited quantities of it is either a coward, a born slave, or a lunatic, and no self-respecting woman should marry such an imbecile. To become a child-bearer of a mere hireling, a day-drudge, is the last resort of a sensible feminine. Dowerless women never regard a poor lover with enthusiastic favor, except in conventional romances. Without being capable of logical reasoning, yet women intuitively comprehend that there is often a lack of courage in the race of bondmen. If a man possesses wealth, no matter how obtained, he can pick and choose among the most delightful darlings in the land. Nay, he can even buy them if he wants to, by the carload. Behind all the hypocritical veneer and the piety of fashion, women of all ranks are still a marketable commodity. Whenever the supply exceeds the demand, they are straightway transmuted into Magdalenes, concubines, slaves, or new women. When few in number, as in young colonies, they possess a certain proportion of selective influence. But when for every eligible man there is a scour of eligible women, their market value dwindles, and instead of selecting, they become the selected, or, as Darwin puts it, the sexual struggle is of two kinds. In one, it is between the individual of the same sex, generally the males, in order to drive away or kill their rivals, the females remaining passive. While on the other, the struggle is likewise between the individuals of the same sex, generally the females, which are no longer remaining passive, but select the more agreeable partners. And that's pretty much where this book ends. And he says if you want more, then he will write a book too. But clearly, I don't think that there's another book too. So tell me, how much of this feels familiar? Because I was reading this and I was like, I feel like I've heard this stuff said by a lot of modern podcasters, by a lot of modern people talking about gender politics, about actual politics. And then I see these same behaviors about like how men are treating women, how the power struggle is being done to people not even involved in the political sphere. Again, talking about just the creative arts, talking about the political people coming into the creative arts and then like smashing it down because they're going to be the masters of the area because they're tired of not being the masters in whatever area they came from. But so there is all of that. Do you see what I see, especially in the arts? I brought this up specifically because looking at the Shad stuff and then looking at the conversations happening on Twitter, it feels like I've been trying to figure out what it is I'm looking at and why certain people are so okay with victimizing people who have never done anything to them. And to me, it feels like a bunch of people feel like they have been wronged and are dominated by those who are currently in charge of the artistic fields. And by that, I just mean Hollywood. And because of that, they feel like their favorite things, their legacy medias, their legacy properties have been destroyed by these people that don't care, who are exerting power over them. And so then these political people who don't have the power over Hollywood are coming into the arts and exerting their power over people that are less powerful than they are. And then I see them arguing that IP shouldn't exist because they want to be able to do, you know, Indiana Jones or 007 or Star Wars on their own without having to deal with copyright law. And that just becomes a thing about maintaining power. It's not about having the property and wanting to do right by the property. It's just wanting to take the power away from other people. That's why you have certain people cheering on the theft of art while insulting the artists who are creating. They believe that the artists, all artists, even the independent artists, the small artists in other countries, are oppressing them because they don't have the power that they want. And if they can take those properties from the people that hold them, be it George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, be it the logo for ISOM, be it Star Wars or Disney, which you get to see now with the Daily Wire trying to do a Snow White to compete with Disney's Snow White. It's all about might makes right and stomping over the other person, because one thing is that arts are artifacts or cultural artifacts. And so if you're in control of the cultural artifacts, then you are in control of people. And so if you can steal those cultural artifacts from the people that you believe are overrunning you, are overpowering you, are controlling you, or oppressing you, then that means that you are in power and now you can do what you want to oppress them. And I feel like to some extent, the political people that are trying to enter the culture war, who don't really care about arts but care about power, what they would do is they would take the properties and then insert as many of their political opinions into those properties as they could to insult the other side instead of just telling a story. Not all, but the ones that are trying to steal specifically, that don't really care about intellectual property, that argue against intellectual property, I just see it as a means of dominating. And they don't care who they hurt because they're so focused on dominating the other. And as long as you have the power, then you can't be wrong. So it's all about winning, to then justify the pain that you cause others and the theft and the immorality that you cause, because as long as you're right, then as long as you win, then you're right. Anyway, that's why I got into this. Personally, I like to read very vastly. Maybe that's not obvious by now, but I like to read very widely, and I like to try to understand perspectives very different than my own for why people do what they do. And so then I end up reading nonfiction books like this, as well as obviously like psychology and philosophy in different ways, even if I don't agree. And with that said, I will discuss like comic books where there's a different opinion, video games where there's a different opinion. It's not personal. It's just getting different perspectives. And one of my favorite things is, hey, this is what I experienced with this book and this is what I took away from it. What did you take away from it? But, you know, then you get into it with the political people and they think that you're having a fight with them when it's just like, I'm just talking about the freaking book, my guy. It's not that serious. Anyway, that'll come in a later thing. With that said, let me know what your thoughts are on Might Makes Right and the Redbeard. Have you heard any of this before? What do you see? Do you think that there is any applicableness to today? Like, by that I mean, do you see people practicing this today? I think it's a little too close to a bunch of the crap in the manosphere, that's for sure. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?